Hey, I'm Guy.
I'm John.
It's our YouTube channel. Subscribe to it and give this video a like. Thank you.
Podcast below in the description. Subscribe to that as well.
We're presented by our friends, John, Tito's Handmade Vodka.
Yes, have yourself a Tito's soda this weekend.
Crafted to be savored responsibly. As soon as that game hits halftime, we're going to start our podcast here on YouTube on Saturday night at halftime of the Niner-Chiefs game, is what I said the other day, and I thought about it a little more. I think the players are very excited to get into a stadium with some fans at home.
Listen, historically, Andy has been aggressive in preseason.
Yeah.
He does not.
He's old school in that way, right?
He's very old school. So I would imagine the majority of his starters will get a series. So at least you see, for me would be the best. Obviously, they're the best team in the AFC. But, I know they got beat in the Super Bowl. Their offensive line is dramatically different. I mean, they easily could win the Super Bowl again this year. There just is some juice. I had a buddy on the Chiefs who just texted me like, God, I'm fired up for this game. Like, they were just excited. I was like, yeah, me too. Like, I wish it was week one, but I'll take this. And also, I think what's cool and it'll help our show is I'll be fascinated to text some of the guys and be like, what'd you guys think, about the quarterback? Like, it is. I'm going to get pretty good scouting reports on, the majority of guys are going to play are going to be, the backups, but just it's cool. Like I'm glad because they've done joint practices before with the Texans. Like it could easily be the Texans, right? It could, or it could be just some random shitty team. Like the Chiefs to me get me a little more fired up to watch. I saw Branch or one of those guys asked Trey Lance yesterday, like, have you ever met Patrick Mahomes? And he's like, what do you mean? No, he's like, no. He's like, or excited to see him? It's kind of a weird question, but Patrick Mahomes is probably the second most famous guy right now in the league behind Brady or, him or Rodgers. So it's anytime he just walks in your stadium, it adds a little juice, right?
Yeah. And better teams have, guess what? Better backups.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Andy, while you were talking, I did a quick search. Andy Reid said, I'm going to basically do it the same way we've done it before. So I think the indication is that you might actually get a quarter of starters for the Kansas City Chiefs on Saturday.
Jesus.
I've not seen that explicitly said by him, but I think the expectation. Now, again, you may not get everybody starting, right? They may not play everybody.
Kelsey might not play or something.
But there's a belief from some of these Chiefs reports that I'm reading right now that you're going to get a quarter, which we'll talk more about how much Trey Lance is going to play. That's fantastic news if you're the Niners, because that means Trey Lance, who will play with the twos, and again, we'll get to that, might actually get some starting level defenders on the other side of the ball, which would add some weight to whatever he does.
I'd even say like your backup defensive backs going up against some of these receivers that even if you don't, like Andy always has some new receivers. One thing you've known since he's been in Kansas City, they all run about 4 140s. So it is like Lenore's out there, Ambry Thomas is out there against some of those guys, but just it's a good matchup. You're right. Andy historically plays guys. I remember when I first got to the Eagles, the year or 2 years before. Do you remember there's a center, I think Hank Fraley. I think he actually coaches in the Pac-12 now. He was a center for the Eagles. He coached at San Jose State. Might be at Arizona.
Hank Fraley.
Sound familiar? And he had Andy was so old school in like the mid-2000s. His starters would play the fourth preseason game, Pete Carroll style. And then I think he had shattered his leg, and then they stopped doing that. But like it became the Sean McVay, which I'm pro Sean McVay doing this. I would do it this way. It is very out of the ordinary. All these coaches that were like part of staffs in the 80s and 90s, they would have been. It never would have been discussed, right? You just Kittle or whoever you have just gets at minimum 2 series. They play. Right. They don't just if they're healthy, they play. That's become very, and maybe it's as simple as the economics. You lose a player who's making $15 million. You look at the pie chart of your team. You're like, what was I doing? Now maybe it's all relative, right? It would have been the same in like 1996 if you lost a legit starter. It does feel like more guys got hurt in our adult life in the preseason than it did like growing up. But I wasn't super locked in.
Yeah, I mean there is apparently some research out there that says the softer, quote unquote softer, but the less physical practices have gotten, the more injuries happen. John, let's take a moment, tell everybody about deck.com/ham, free shipping on a great drawer system for your truck.
What about our friends at DraftKings? Download the DraftKings app, daily fantasy, promo code HAM when you do, get in our league.
I do think it probably for a while was one of those things that it's just like playing in bowl games. It's just what you did. No one really thought much of it, right? Yeah, you play in the preseason games. Of course you do. You got to get ready for the season. Probably makes it easier. The more everybody stops doing it, the easier it is for you to stop doing it. You don't want your backups out there getting their asses kicked by somebody else's starters because the other guys are playing their starters, right? So coaches communicate and go, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? There's some of that.
You know when there was 14 games, they used to have 6 preseason games? Can you imagine that? That'd be a lot.
When there was 14 regular season games, they played 6 preseason games?
Because Peter King wrote when they did the 17th game, the whole thing is just the even schedule, just 20 games, right? It's the 20 games. So they were at 14-6. Now they went to 16-4. Now what are they at? 17-3.
Yeah.
Eventually they'll be 18-2. It's just that they're staying at that 20 number. They just get closer and closer to the games.
Yeah, you don't give up the gate, right?
No. They're not going to ever go to like 18-0. No, it's just going to be 20.
Yeah. I'm listening to this book on Audible called The Club about like the rise of the Premier League. I'm not a huge soccer guy, but it's interesting. Business. And, you know, they brought a lot of Monday Night Football, and they studied the NFL, and they talked to the NFL when they started launching their own major TV network coverage, which guess who launched it was Rupert Murdoch, and who owns Fox, of course, and helped the NFL come of age in the TV era, and started making a lot of money. But
newer book? Is it like is the guy who wrote it recently, or
that I don't know. But
it sounds like an interesting read.
Yeah, it's an interesting listen.
Or listen.
And one of the things that happened was there was a point in time, and I might have my timeline off a little, but it was the late 80s. There were fights. It was the bathroom sucked. Going to soccer was not a family-friendly thing. There were deaths. There were several incidents. There were a couple incidents where like a bunch of people died because the stadium caught on fire and people can get out. It was a mess.
The hooligans.
It was a mess, and the hooligans. And one of the things that they mandated was that you couldn't have any standing room only seats. So all these stadiums had to reduce capacity, and they had to spend a lot of money. So like some of these teams went from 55,000 capacity to 35,000 capacity because the government mandated, we're going to make these places safer. You're not just going to be packing as many people in as you can, only as many people as there are seats. And so they kind of, they had to take a step back financially. You don't volunteer to do that, right? The league is not, if the government says you can only play 19 games, okay, then they'd have to figure something out. But the league is not going to volunteer to make its stadium smaller if they can sell the seats, and they're not going to volunteer to put less games on TV if they can win that number of games in a collective bargaining agreement.